It was time for the monthly physical evaluation, and Nicholas was more than ready for his cell to be opened. The young man sat on the floor between his bed and the door, his head bowed and his eyes glued to the keycard he was holding in his left hand. His expression was made of stone, and he listened as the others chatted amongst themselves. He was simply waiting for whoever came to do his evaluation, and then he would incapacitate them. From there, his escape using the keycard would be inevitable. He had wanted to share his plan with the others, but despite his desires, the logical step was to keep it to himself. He couldn't risk the fact that their conversations were always recorded and later heard by the doctor himself. A blond, average-sized man with the body of a track athlete unlocked the door with his own keycard and stepped into the room. He wore a white lab jacket and slacks, with a blank expression on his face. In his hands, he held a tray with syringes, gloves, and other necessary tools for the evaluation. Nicholas narrowed his eyes and glared at the man as he approached. "You know the drill, Nicholas," the man told him. "Sit on your bed and remain still until we are done. Answer my questions and we can get this over with." Nicholas shrugged and stood up, glancing at his bed. His body was pumping with adrenaline, but he did well at hiding it. His moment was almost here, and he would be more than ready to act. As soon as the examiner turned his attention away, believing that Nicholas was sitting on his bed, the latter made his move. He lunged from behind the examiner, pushing him from the back and into the wall ahead near the door. Nicholas made sure to slam his face and skull into the concrete wall as hard as he could, ensuring that the man fell unconscious when the teenager let go of him. The examiner's face smashed into the wall, and he indeed collapsed to the floor, his eyes rolling into the back of his head. Nicholas wasted no time in stepping over the man's unconscious body and using the keycard he had collected to open the door. He stepped out into the concrete hallway and felt an immediate rush of freedom. The others were in their cells, frantically shouting and calling out for one another. "What's going on?" Catalina yelled. Winter replied, shouting, "I'm not sure. I heard a loud bang and then nothing. Joshua, did you hear anything?" "No," Joshua murmured, his shrill tone still echoing through the hall. "But it did sound like it came from Nicholas's cell." "Nick!" Jamie called out for him, just before he opened her cell with the keycard. Her mouth fell open and he smiled before moving to the next cell, opening it as well. Cole immediately stood up from his bed and moved for the door after seeing Nicholas dash to the following cell. In the matter of a minute, all 6 test subjects were in the hallway, staring at one another in close proximity for the first time in their lives. Nicholas knew that he couldn't stop moving. Just because they were out of their cells, they still had no idea how to actually leave the facility. As the others started to question him, Nicholas swiped the keycard at the only door leading out of the hallway. When it opened, he looked back at his only friends. "Come on, let's go," he told them in a firm tone. "I can't answer your questions right now." Nicholas ran through the open doorway and into another hallway, this one having various paths, doors, and corners. For the first time in years, they had choices. Nicholas placed a finger over his lips to signal for the others to be quiet as they followed him. They made a few turns and then stopped at the following corner. They crouched in the darkness as many guards raced by them in the direction of their empty cells. "Stay down," Nicholas told Jamie, who was shaking in both fear and anxiousness. "How do we even know where to go?" Cole asked, his tone and facial expression both skeptical. Before anyone could answer his question, however, a voice sounded off on the various speakers in the facility. The dreamers immediately recognized the voice as the old man's. "Attention, everyone," Dr. Phillips spoke in a calm voice. "The 6 test subjects have escaped but are still within the facility. We do not yet know how they've gotten out, but it's imperative that we find and collect them. Furthermore, I am giving a no-kill order for anyone who makes contact. Anyone who kills even one of them will be shot." Those last words sent a shiver up each of their spines, enough so that they all shared an uneasy look and Catalina shuddered. It was clear that they would remain here forever, if Dr. Phillips had his way. I would rather die than go back in that cell, Jamie whispered, her eyes torn between terror and anticipation. Me too, Winter agreed with her before grasping Jamie's shaking shoulders. But we aren't going to die. Winter's words sunk in for the group, and they felt a desperate need to escape, more so than ever. The underground facility was now a madhouse as guards, doctors, maintenance personnel, and even soldiers were racing through the halls and storming rooms. Nicholas and the others hid in the shadows, slowly moving farther away from their cells. Catalina and Jamie were terrified, but Winter was even more determined than Nicholas to find a way out. Where do we go? Jamie whispered, trembling as the group had to stop again, and 4 armed soldiers ran into a nearby room. Nicholas led them down the hallway as they darted past the room and further down the halls. When they turned the corner, however, a woman wearing a lab coat was standing before them. She seemed just as surprised as they were, startled even, as if she had hoped to not be the one to find them. Before almost everyone, including the woman, could react, Winter lunged forward and slammed a hard right fist into the woman's lower jaw, knocking her out instantly. As the woman slumped to the floor, Winter looked back at the others who were stunned. But most of them had seen how strong Winter was, in their dreams. They had seen her lead and protect them countless times, often dying for them. In here! Cole shrieked at the group as he opened a door to the nearest room, and they all piled inside. There were dozens of footsteps approaching, and after Catalina locked the door behind them, Nicholas dumped a large bookshelf in front of the door. Cole dragged a large filing cabinet and used it to pin the bookshelf against the door, and they all stepped back. They had no idea how they would escape the facility, much less how they were going to get out of this room. But they could hear the boots of soldiers in the hallway, slowly creeping towards the door. What are we going to do? Jamie whimpered, closing her eyes as tightly as she could. We're screwed, Cole whispered, hoping the rest of the group wouldn't hear him. His eyes were scanning the room, but to no avail. It was a room full of filing cabinets and bookshelves with a couple of empty desks in the center. Jamie and Catalina were shaking as Winter held on to them, and Joshua had a stern look on his face, as if the boy was coming to accept their fate. Nicholas shook his head, refusing to believe that they had failed. He had come too far to get them out of their cells, and if they were to be recaptured, Dr. Phillips would see to it that they could never escape again. I've been thinking about something, Joshua said, and the group frowned as they looked in his direction. What? Cole asked him, raising a curious eyebrow. We're dreamers, Joshua began. All 6 of us. We see other worlds when we sleep, through the eyes of our alternates. But surely there is more to it. Our dreams make us special. I believe that they can help us if we let them. That doesn't make much sense, Cole grunted, waving the boy away. No amount of dreaming is going to get us out of this hell. A woman from another world told me that she was waiting for us in this one, in a city called Topeka. Joshua continued, ignoring Cole's words. She told me that we're psychics and that in other worlds, we fight men like Dr. Phillips. Nicholas narrowed his eyes as he asked, What was her name, Joshua? Autumn Walker, Joshua answered, and the rest of the group shared a surprised look. They had all seen or met her before, on different worlds under different circumstances. She had told every single one of them at one time or another to believe in themselves as well as each other. Wait! Nicholas gasped, his eyes wide and his thoughts racing. I think Joshua is onto something. The others frowned, turning their attention to Nicholas. His mind was racing backwards, replaying every dream he'd had in the last 6 months. He filtered through his brain until he recalled a certain meeting he had dreamed of. In a world that persecuted psychics, Nicholas, Winter, and several others were gathered in a building trying to plan their next move. But it was something specific he had forced himself to remember. Winter hadn't simply arrived like everyone else. She had somehow appeared in the room out of thin air, as if she had teleported herself from one spot to another. Winter, Nicholas began quietly before clearing his throat. We know that our dreams are real places in the multiverse, right? Yeah, Winter said as she blinked a few times. How does that help us right now? I've seen you do some pretty amazing things in my dreams, Nicholas answered, this time his voice stern. I think you can teleport, Winter, and that's how we're going to escape hell. The others were speechless for a moment until Catalina also recalled. An entire life found its way to the surface, and the young woman knew that Nicholas was telling the truth. He's right, Catalina agreed, and Winter frowned at her. I've seen myself do it too, Winter said with a nod, but I don't have the slightest clue on how to do it. I've just watched through another pair of eyes as another version of myself fought for her life. There's a world where we grew up together, Catalina revealed, and she smiled as she thought back to what she had seen. In this world, you could teleport, and you even explained how you did it. Every one of them were practically screaming, but not a sound could be heard. Catalina turned to Winter, and the two shared a deep look. Clear your mind, Winter, Catalina encouraged. Clear your mind and focus only on one thing. Focus on where you want to go. The soldiers outside were preparing to knock the door down and storm the room. They'd found the unconscious woman in the hallway, and she was just waking up, blabbering about the test subjects having compromised her, although she was more than glad to not have subdued them. It wouldn't have worked anyhow. The door started to shake on its hinges as the soldiers tried to plow their way through it. When they finally managed to knock it out of the frame, sending it falling into the room ahead, they barged in, raising their weapons and shouting for the subjects to surrender. What they found on the other side, however, was nothing. The room was empty, leaving no trace of where the test subjects were, or how they managed to escape.